Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 2 of season 2 of Supergirl called The Last Children of Krypton. And this is an episode that's got quite a lot of nice stuff going on. It mostly serves though to sort of flesh Superman out a little bit more and kind of advance the plot in some ways that work better than others. So let's just kind of get right into it. I was kind of a little bit disappointed with the whole Metallo stuff this episode. Metallo is a pretty respectable Superman villain, and here he comes across pretty thin. And I don't even think like the Asian guy they turned into the second Metallo. Did that guy even have a name? I don't think they did. And that bit where the Superman and Supergirl confront the original Metallo, and they're like, "Oh yeah," and then there's this other guy who's carrying off a thing in Metropolis, and they're all like, "We'll be back for you later." It's like, well, why don't you use your heat vision to melt his cybernetic legs? That way he can't, get away. And also the whole, blasting them with, kryptonite energy from his chest is all. Sorry, my cat's freaking. Is all well and good, but why doesn't Metallo ever aim for anywhere rather than directly on their chest where they are obviously protected now thanks to Wynn's little gadget? And I thought Wynn was just like a hacker. How in the world does he know how to do stuff like this? And again, some of the stuff they dumped on Felicity Smoke over on Arrow, way outside of the wheelhouse of an IT girl. So, not as good as the first one. New bed, just into a new bed. Anyway, so that I thought was a little bit disappointing, but it's kind of made up for Superman and Martian Manhunter and Kara and Alex teaming up to take down the various Metallos. Not really sure why John decided to disguise himself as a little girl dressed as Supergirl, but hey, why not, right? Now, the continued problems between Superman and Martian Manhunter. I love how it really looks like it's actually going to come to blows. And Wynn is all like, "Oh my God, Superman and Martian Manhunter are about to get into a fight. This is terrible." And also, it's also awesome. And they do both make their valid points yet again, but ultimately it comes around to John gives the kryptonite to Superman with the ideas like, look, it's gotten to the point where the potential good the kryptonite could do as a deterrent against evil Kryptonians is getting in the way of the safety of the two good Kryptonians that we know that we can trust and who would be our strongest allies in this situation. So yeah, I kind of would have liked a little bit more explanation as to what Superman actually did with that kryptonite. I mean, if I was him, I'd have flown it up into space and thrown it into the sun. Might have stashed it in the Fortress of Solitude. And it was definitely nice to go back there and see Kellex again. And, again, sort of Superman point out that, these disagreements they have, this disagreement with the kryptonite is really kind of getting in the way of the fact that under the circumstances, the two of them really should be very good friends. And I'm glad that was able to get resolved, because I do sort of like to see that dynamic between Superman and Martian Manhunter. They are, in a lot of ways, guys who are very similar people. What's interesting about Martian Manhunter is in the comics. I don't know if this is something that they still play around with anymore. Back in years back, during the Grant Morrison days on Justice League, I remember, it was sort of the idea is that most of the superheroes in the world spend their time in first world nations, particularly the United States. Martian Manhunter, seeing sort of okay, these areas are pretty well covered, instead would focus on lesser known countries. It was even stated that in a lot of third world countries, he was actually even better known than Superman. So he was kind of when supervillains go on a rampage in Guatemala or something, he's the guy that they turn to. They even showed him taking down a supervillain who was causing some trouble in Australia. So I always thought that was an interesting little twist for Martian Manhunter. But anyway, getting back to this episode. Um, let's see. I do have to say, I was kind of cool to see them bring back the power armor and have Alex fight in that. But she takes at least a couple of blows to the head from Metallo. And, despite him being strong enough to sort of go up against Superman and Supergirl, being punched by Metallo does not immediately pulp her head it should. I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, I guess somehow the exoskeleton is protecting her. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And speaking of stuff that doesn't make sense, I love how they have that bit where Superman and Supergirl stop the bank robbers. They shoot at them, and then the one guy walks over and punches Superman. Superman even kind of turns his head to sort of roll with the punch, just so the guy doesn't hurt his hand, like completely shatter his hand. And then he goes, "They shoot me, and then they try and punch me. Like, if the bullets don't work, why do they think their fists would? I would never understand that." And that is a long-time thing in Superman. I remember I watched a bunch of episodes of the old 50s Superman TV show. And even more hilarious is the guys would shoot at Superman there. He'd just sort of stand there, sort of smirking. And then after they ran out of bullets, they would throw the guns at him. Yeah, that's probably even less effective than trying to punch Superman with your fist. Now, speaking of Alex, she kind of gets this moment where Kara has basically invited Clark to join in on Sisters Night, and she takes some rather serious offense to this. It's kind of upset. It's like, I gave up my medical career and made all these choices to protect Kara, and now she's sort of acting like this and talking about moving to Metropolis with Clark and all this. It sort of feels like Kara's being kind of an ingrate, which is really not fair. One, Alex made those choices all on her own. Kara didn't even know that Alex was in the DEO. So, kind of acting as if Kara's doing something wrong here. Alex is seriously in the wrong here. And I'm glad that they gave Wynn that moment to sort of point out to her, it's like, look, you're not doing right. Family is not about keeping score. And you should be happy that you have people that care about you. I grew up in a foster home. Look at how I felt about that. And it is nice to see Wynn kind of having that moment that he's willing to sort of stand up to Alex on that one. And just his continued fanboying over Superman. He just like gives him a hug. He's like, next time you're here, we've got to hang out for real. It's just like, Wynn, I love you, dude, but I gotta admit, if I've been in your situation, I'd probably have done the same thing. The whole getting a hug from Superman. It reminds me of another Superman story I read. It was a crossover with Gen 13, which is a teen superhero team that kind of was a big thing back in the 90s, and they sort of fallen by the wayside, more or less in more modern times, although after the Wildstorm universe was incorporated into the DC universe proper, at least one or two of the characters did pop up there. In Caitlin Fairchild was a big character in Superboy, and they brought Sarah Rainmaker into the movement. But anyway, they did this crossover, and Superman rescues one of the team members, and he grabs her and is carrying her and flying and stuff. And she later says, "This feels like what it would have been like to be held by Jesus." And, Jesus metaphors in Superman are old hat. But nonetheless, I always thought that was a very moving description of what it would be like to be around someone like Superman. But anyway, getting back on track. Let's see. Not really very much to say about what's going on with Cadmus. This is a very far outside the wheelhouse of what Cadmus are in the comics. They actually remind me of a more obscure organization called The Veil. That popped up in the Teen Titans run when Dan Jurgens was writing it. And they were basically just an organization who was dedicated to wiping out alien influence on Earth. Unfortunately, that particular run of Teen Titans is not well remembered, which I have to say I thought is a shame. I thought... I thought it was a good. It was them trying to do something new, introducing a bunch of new characters. Mostly didn't go over as well as with the fans as I personally thought it should have, but to each his own. Let's see, what else? Oh yeah, we also are introduced to Snapper Carr in this episode, and he's radically different than any portrayal of him I've ever seen in the comics. Usually Snapper is this very upbeat young guy. Here he's more or less kind of what you would expect out of somebody like Perry White. This is, when I was watching this performance here, I was reminded of one of the times that Warren Ellis, one of my favorite comic writers, he briefly wrote Perry White, and he basically had White say, Kent Lane, I am your editor. Prepare for your execution. And, he was going to yell at them about something involving, hey, you two, quit messing around and do your job. So I'm just like, man, that was just such a memorable moment. Now, whether or not Snapper actually is behaving within the dictates of what his job description lies, here it's like, yeah, I've been assigned to this office. Yeah, well, I didn't assign you here, and I don't think you have any place here, so F off. I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure he doesn't actually have that authority. And I did like that Kat basically said to Kara, like, look, so basically you want me to fix this problem for you. No, you're an adult. Go deal with it yourself. Which, it's kind of hard not to take Kara's side on this because, her supervisor is acting in a very inappropriate fashion. On the other hand, Snapper does have a fair point. It's like, yeah, you don't get to be a reporter just because you say you've decided that you're a reporter. I mean, if I tried to go into a hospital and operate on somebody and then said, oh yeah, it's okay for me to do this because I've decided that I'm a doctor, yeah, obviously they would have me arrested. Now, that's not completely the same thing, but you get what I'm driving at. And we also have, Kat's more or less, I'll still pop up from time to time, but I'm going to go off and do new things, which mostly is due to the fact that Callista Flockhart didn't want to spend most of her time in Vancouver filming Supergirl as she's an LA resident. And, okay, I'm fine with that. And they make it clear that, yes, she's going to pop up from time to time. And, okay, cool. That's fine. Having Kat Grant around as a mentor was great and all, but, Kara does sort of need to not always be able to run to Kat for whatever piece of advice that she needs to sort of deal with her issue. This forces her to sort of figure things out on her own. And she at least does get to the point where Snapper says, okay, maybe I can teach you something after all. So we'll see how things go from there. And I think that covers everything that I need to say about this episode. Nothing really to say about the whole thing with Mom L waking up. It's really too soon to get a read out of him. Although I did like how they did kind of reference how, correctly in fact, photosynthesis works. Taking different types of energy and a different type of energy and turning it into chemical energy. So obviously, probably Mon-El waking up and sort of having to deal with him, that's definitely going to be the big focus of what's going to be happening next episode, and I am very much looking forward to seeing all of that. With that said, I'm going to call it here. As always, folks, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and please also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.